Vamos allá.
This conversation already started a while ago. I'm here at the CAP Center with Lee Stringer, author of Grand Central Winter. And we are going to be meeting our neighbor, Lee, and talking about his work and particularly about this upcoming performance at the Emelin Theater on November 11th. So welcome.
Thanks,
Actually,
welcome.
I am visiting because this is a place where you spend a lot of time.
Well, yes, for about 3 years now, I've been working here with the CAP program, CAP Center. We started an after-school program for kids that gives them help with homework, help assist them, make sure it gets done, and we also do a little SAT college entry prep for older students, and some tutoring as well.
In writing.
Well, yes, the writings are part of college entry prep. You know, a lot of kids who get ready to go to college really haven't gotten their hands wrapped around how to write a strong personal essay, which they always ask, a letter or an essay. And that's, until they meet you, that piece of paper is you. So it's very vital to do that right. So we help them with that sort of thing. I try to help doing a little fundraising as well.
But this, speaking about writing, this book, Grand Central Winter, that I couldn't put down. And I found myself having a long conversation with you as I was reading the book, because in what could have been a saga and really emotionally charged narrative, you were very economic with that, talking about 10 years living in the streets.
Well, you know, you just said one of the greatest things you could tell a writer of a book is that you had a conversation with that person, because that's when a book isn't just a one-way street, then you know, as a writer, that's very gratifying.
And when did this book start?
You mean when it come out, or when it was published, or when I started writing?
When did the idea of,
well,
I'm going to put this in writing, I have a lot to say,
Okay.
a lot to share?
It's interesting. Some people say they got their job through the New York Times. I got my book deals through the Manhattan Transit Authority. And the way that happened was, at the time I was on the street and homeless, and I was writing for a paper called Street News, which was designed to be sold by the homeless. But also, through a long series of events, I got into writing for them. And one day, a publisher bought a copy of the paper on the subway. Now, at that point, you know, street news was just a kind of an instrument of informed Samaritanism, the idea to get the buck in the person's hand. Few people read it. So this publisher buys a copy and he, like, tucks it under his arm, waiting for his stop so he can check it or whatever he's going to do with it. But then the subway goes into a tunnel and gets stuck for 20 minutes. It's like divine intervention. And he's, you know, and he pulls the thing out and he reads it. And when he finally gets to his office, he calls up the paper and says, "I like what you guys are doing." He says, "I'd like to help. What do I do? Take a donation? Do I take a subscription? What's the deal?" And he says, "And by the way, who is this Lee Stringer guy?" He says, "I like his writing." He says, it doesn't take me where I think it's going to go." And so I get in the office and they tell me a publisher, you know, so I call him up. And he says, "Well, why don't you come over?" Now I go over there expecting 14th floor, red carpet, paneled walls, you know, a bevy of people in briar pipes and, you know, tweed suits. But I end up down near Chinatown, and at the time the name of the publishing company was 4 walls, 8 windows, and aptly named because that's exactly what they were. There's this one large room, 4 walls, 8 windows. And the guy, one of the partners, Dan Simon, was sitting behind the most minimal desk I've ever seen in my life. It's two-drawer file cabinets with a board across it. And he said this, he said that, and he says, perhaps you'd like to do a book. Now, at the time, I was still, addicted to crack cocaine. And this was my thought process. It was book, advance, money, crack.
Party.
Yes, let's do a book. I'm a book writing guy. Let's write us a book. And so we signed the deal. And I got a little money, advance money, smoked it all up. And that following Monday morning, I said, well, now I got to actually do this. So the original concept was that it would be called The Writings of Lee Stringer. And I thought, well, there's a book I could walk by 8 days a week without buying. And he said, but then he said, well, you know what? But he figured my stuff I had written in Street News could be cold for a book. And then he said, but maybe you want to write some recent biography so we know where it comes from. So I said, okay, and I started writing these stories out of my life. And as I continued in that process, that became bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, crowding out those last sort of editorial pieces towards the end. And I liked it because most editorials that you pull a paradigm out of the air, and if you're a good writer, you can make it sound whole. But this had the advantage of the front of the book tracing the path by which I came to these thoughts and ideas, so that made them more valid, more powerful.
And I remember at the very beginning, when you are evicted from your apartment,
Mm-hmm.
and the marshal is knocking in, and you have 15 minutes to gather your belongings, and you're out.
Yes.
You're in the street.
Yes.
And you share at that point an incredible sense of freedom that I could relate to, in the sense of no expectation. I am free. And it's almost the beginning of a journey, because it's a journey back to being. Almost.
That's very well put. I think it's very well put, and it's true. I think a lot of us end up in our 30s with a life we're wearing like an ill-fitting garment. There's many reasons why we took this turn or that turn, but you have to sometimes walk down the street before you know it's a street you want to be on. But by then we've got all this appendage. We have to pay bills. We might have family. We have stuff that just compels us to keep marching forward with that ill-fitting
stuff.
So the fact that I know now 2 things happened. One was when crack cocaine came along and I got my first taste of it. All those things already dimmed in importance. So I had already stepped away from, that busyness, empty busyness being central to my life. I had a new empty busyness, but which would, work itself one way or the other eventually. But at that point, then saying goodbye to the apartment and all was just the last piece of this, and it was kind of liberating. It was, this construct wasn't working for me, and I would have continued it for who knows how long. But now, now I'm going to have to find a new way to live.
Because then it's a different routine. It's an alternative routine. It's an alternative existence, because whoever you left when you left that life, it goes on there somewhere.
Yes.
It's like a parallel
Yes.
existence.
Yeah.
And even though yes, probably, the whole addiction took over your life, your body, your soul, almost. But something was core. They're present at every part when you're talking about your observations of people, which I find so insightful because you're outside, a stranger in the margins. You know, the reading of the intentions as well as, but the reading of the discomfort and of people with suffering, with a reality that shouldn't be.
Well, you know, when you say people are suffering, ultimately, that's all of us at some point in life.
Yes.
And I think, you know, we go forward with our best intentions and our best knowledge. But I think the primary act in dealing with anybody suffering or struggling, the primary act is listening. Most of the time, we come with a host of assumptions. And I think some of those assumptions may, you know, work for the mass. But I think the key thing is listening, being there and listening, taking in is the first act of any kind of effective Samaritanism or social help.
But usually when policies are designed, when we want to address the problem, the issue, whatever we want to call it, to feel comfortable with it and feel that we're doing something, if it doesn't come from listening and from within, it doesn't work.
Yes, but you know, there's the other way of looking at it, and that is, what is policy? In a way, it's about having an effect on the people you're making the policy about. But really, at the bottom, policy is about choosing the type of people we want to be as a nation and as people. Policy is about, do we want to be the kind of people who makes the attempt to help those in need and those who are struggling? That's policy. And this modern talk about you know, what's effective and what's not effective has really put that essential part of policy on the back burner. It should be back in the front. Once we decide the kind of people we're going to be, we'll find a way to be it.
And not do it grudgingly.
Right. We'll find a way to be it if that's what we're going to be, as best as we can. If we start arguing, all trying to become sociologists and you know, look too hard at specific outcomes that we expect, it's going to be very gray, because life doesn't follow our schedule. I tell people, you know, it's not always given that we see the fruit of our good doing. True. But it's there. We just don't get to see the fruit all the time. So, you know, it's a very poetic business.
The issue of homelessness, is it an issue of poverty? Is it an issue of race? Is an issue, what is happening to us that we leave a chunk? I don't know what the numbers are, and I hate to talk about numbers because we're talking about people, that pushes this extreme.
Well, I mean, your question sort of frames homelessness as, what's the disease? But I think it's a symptom. So in that case, in that respect, it's all of those things. It's partly about race. It's partly about poverty. It's also about where the rest of us put our focus, our attention. For a number of reasons, in the 80s, people were very self-involved. It was, well, let me build up my own personal little empire. Let me go about making things a better world this way. And I think there were some good results of that, and there were some negative results in that, to the extent that you opt out of the social contract, there isn't enough income and things you could buy to buffer you from the effects. And I think what the middle class discovered during that era is that, yes, the social welfare system cost them money, but also bought them something. It bought them a buffer between the lower, harder edge. In the 80s, that hard edge was right in their face.
But in the 80s?
Yes, you know, it bought them a buffer. And then in the 80s, these were right in their face. I mean, people were walking through Grand Central and down the streets, literally had to step over an army of homeless people.
it's small. It's your story. It's you, and all these characters you encounter in the same struggles
book.
and how they address in your story. But then there's a lot of reflection on the wider, as you're saying, you know, the 80s and what happened. You know, with the shelter system. I loved the stories, and also you touch on race, on the difference, you know, that you feel that is painful. I'm as human, and yet I'm in the same situation, yet the treatment is different. So your book gets published. It's translated to how many languages?
I think 18 or 20 languages on 4 continents.
So did the book bring closure for you? You know, so okay, I'm starting a new chapter. Did it allow you to put together all that experience and put it somewhere that also allowed us, people like me that read the book and get a glimpse of looking through your eyes for and what it's like? And then did this get published once you were in Project Renewal and starting a new chapter, coming back to
Actually, it was
mainstream?
It was
it?
mainstream won't
Is
work.
it?
Actually, it was published afterwards because while I was in the recovery process, you can't do that as a hobby. So I had to stop working on the book, and it took me a year or so afterwards to finish, and it was published. And as far as closure, I would say I don't put a line between that was then and now there's this, because if there's anything I have going for me now, any wisdom or anything, it came from those years.
Right.
So I just see it as one long journey rather than closing out that. And as a matter of fact, once the book was published, it opened up more than closed. I mean, suddenly, you know, I was invited to speak at the UN, and it was on Oprah, and went to Europe, and you know, film people call. It was like, wow. And and I think it's because, you know, it's not a book about the misery of being homeless.
No,
it's not really even about
not.
the issue of homelessness as an issue. It's about people, places, and things. And I think in a way that all of us sort of relate to these people, places, about what's
Yes.
human. And I think that made the difference. But it sort of opened things up and get me a comfortable perch on which to live a life that's a little more connected to who I am, which is the biggest gift we can have. If we can live a life, go about our walk on this earth, doing something connected to who we really are, we are blessed beyond
Precious.
words.
And do you go back? This is a picture of you, right?
That's Semois.
And you go back?
To where? Grand Central?
Do you go back? When you go back, of course you go back. So Grand Central is central to New York, isn't it?
Yes.
But do you go back? Did you keep in touch with some of the people you met?
I did with a few people for a while, like a few, but given the nature of the fact that they're homeless, you know, there's no there wasn't a regular way to do that. There's a story of Richard in there with the baby.
Yes.
And I kept in touch with him, and he had some surprising developments beyond the story. He actually got married to this woman long after his money was gone and the drugs were gone and the kids were taken away. So there's an interesting development in that story. But not, you know, every now and then I run into a few people who I knew back then. And it's always kind of a happy reunion. And, you know, it's interesting, there's not a lot of resentment that, oh, look what you got, all this. There's a lot of happiness for, hey, one of us, you know, look, this is possible. So that was nice.
I particularly liked your portrayal of the media and Geraldo and that experience.
Oh, that Geraldo story, you'll love that.
Because particularly these days, it seems that the media is failing to really focus on the story. It's more the spin. it's more like you were talking about mental health and legislation that had an impact on the ability of people with mental illness to be able to continue to provide for themselves, to take care of themselves. And what are your thoughts on that? What do you think we are missing in terms of our community and what is happening? And now we're coming close to election. All these discourse. Can you take it? I mean, doesn't it drive you crazy?
In a way, it does, because TV is now on endless channels on all the time, and they have to keep filling that with stuff, and they have to get people to watch it. And they found that one of the easiest ways to do this, the most expedient way to do this, is to have confrontation. And so 90% of what we get that isn't drama is some sort of confrontation. There's all these talk shows, and what I think it does is it takes the steam out of forward motion. An issue comes up, and we have this side and that side banging at each other, and not even moving towards light, because to be on the show, they have to take sides, which means both sides have to deny plausibilities of the other side. And those are the very points at which we could learn and move ahead. But they have to be denied in order to make this confrontation thing work. And so we're ultimately doing a tremendous, for the sake of boredom killing, we're doing a tremendous disservice to ourselves. So that's sad, but it doesn't make me angry in the sense that we're all finding our way, we're all banging the walls, and ultimately we'll learn something from this. Eventually we'll run out of this. We'll learn that this isn't working, and we'll be interested in something else. I can only hope. It may get worse before it gets better.
So now the book is coming in a performance.
Yes.
It's the Godlight Theater Company. How did that come about?
Well, about 2 years ago, I got a call from a gentleman named Joe Tantalo, who's the artistic director of something called the Godlight Theater. Now, Godlight Theater has an excellent reputation, and unlike my first publishing, it was a small but well-respected. And this theater company has an excellent reputation for adapting, actually, contemporary literature for the stage. And so he was interested, as a matter of fact, a friend of his who was in recovery had read the book and took it to him and says, "Joe, you gotta do this book next." And then Joe Tantalo read the book, and he loved the book. And so and it took us a while to make a deal.
Because that you're not going to be adapting this.
No, I'm not going to be adapting it. No, they hire somebody to do that. And it's an off-Broadway theater. And it took a while to make a deal because there was we had a film deal, and there were conflicts there.
Right.
And then the economic crisis hit, and the film company went bankrupt. Oh. It's like within weeks of me getting a nice chunk of money, by the way. The minute they started cameras rolling, I was going to get my first chunk of money, and you were going to have me in it, and I managed to hustle up some more money for that. And but then the economic crisis hit. So now we finally got a deal going with for the stage adaptation in the Godlight Theater, and then by kind of a confluence of events, much like the subway deal, Joe Tantalo happened to be out in Brighton Beach at a theater there working a workshop presentation, and he met Lisa Riley of the Emelin Theater, and they got to talking, and what are you doing? And they mentioned this book, and they mentioned my name, and Lisa says, "Oh, I know, he's from Mamaroneck." And next thing you know, they arranged to have a in-progress workshop reading of the play by their cast at the Emelin on November 11th. And I was like, wow, this is hometown. It's like...
I thought when I heard Lisa tell us
yes.
that you were going there was going to be a performance about your book, I thought, well, this is precious because it's our little theater here.
Yes.
and we have so much talent
Yeah.
in our own community. And have you met is someone going to be reading your piece, your voice?
Yeah, there will be an actor playing me. He's far too good looking. I told him they're gonna have to take him out back and hit him with a baseball bat or something to make it authentic. But the people who will be doing this reading may not ultimately be in the final cast,
I see.
but they are part of the theater company. And but what I meant to say, what I think is great about it is I'm very involved with Mamaroneck right now. So I'm just so happy that this town can be the locus for launching this new incarnation.
Yes.
I think that's great. I mean, I'm really dedicated
Full circle.
to Mamaroneck here. Yeah, and so this is great. It's like, boy, all my dreams are coming true.
And you've seen the rehearsals? Have you seen
well,
this
actually,
good-looking man? So now we know.
I missed the first rehearsal because I had the wrong time, but I came in at the end and had a long meeting with the cast and let them ask me questions. I went to dinner with the playwright, who's an English chap, and he's doing his best. There's one thing, he keeps cleaning up the language. I said, no. I don't mean taking out curse words, but proper English. And I said, well, let's not do that so much. Let's let the characters be who they are. But and I haven't seen a final script. It's just been completed, so I'm amazed. But mostly, I'm putting comments. But I do believe there's a different medium involved here, and there's things you have to do for that medium. So I'm not going to be too intrusive at this point.
Wonderful. I want to thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
And this conversation started when I started with the first page, and I'm so glad that we can talk in person. And we have to apologize for all the noise, but we wanted to film right here where you spend a lot of time. So I do hope you get the opportunity to come to the Emelin Theater right here to see the play, see a play in progress, and meet Lee Stringer, who's going to be after the performance for questions, for a dialogue with the audience.
And books, you can get a signed book of the new edition.
Speaking about it. And I want to remind you, it's November 11th at the Emelin Theater. Lee Stringer is going to be there for his book, Grand Central Winter. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And last question, will you autograph it?
Why, sure.
Yes.
My pleasure.
Yes.
Find a blank page.
That I haven't written on.
Here.
Yes.